welcome. I have three guests today: JB Hamby, Katie Burnworth, Andrew Arevalo. So I selected you three. A lot of people run for the first time. You don't bring, I think what each of you bring a wealth of knowledge and connections that's going to benefit you all on your boards on day one. JB, you advocated on behalf of the Salton Sea and water issues throughout the state. You've traveled along the Colorado River and the basin, meeting people and officials, learning and also sharing your thoughts and ideas on the future of water and the future of the Imperial Valley. Katie, you've worked in the private and public sectors, working also on Salton Sea and environmental air quality issues. You have a vast network locally in some of the projects you've done at some of our local schools to mitigate air issues, and also throughout the state, on the Salton Sea projects that you're heavily involved in. And Andrew, you've spoken across the country. You have a very good following on social media, specifically on Twitter, among your peers and colleagues in education. And so, although each of you are running for local boards, you guys all bring, so much to the table that if and when elected on day one, your communities are all going to benefit. So with that being said, what drove each of you all to run for your respective boards? And JB, we could work JB, then Katie, then Andrew, and then we'll rotate as we go on the questions.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you, Gil. Well, for me, the real issue here is that water is life in Imperial Valley, and the whole history of Imperial Valley has really been written in water, as it has much across the rest of the West. Imperial Valley is unique in that it has the single largest water right on the entire Colorado River, and we have among the oldest rights as well. And without water, we would have nothing here. And so as we're moving forward to some very critical junctures, specifically at IID, that affect Imperial Valley foundationally on water and power issues, I grew increasingly concerned because so much of the problems we're experiencing today result from what I would consider, and I think the voters have considered multiple times, to be very short-sighted actions that have squandered the valuable resource that is Imperial Valley's water, that when it's put to use here creates life, opportunity, jobs, and a quality of life. And when it's not here, it creates just the opposite. It creates a degraded environment, it ruins our quality of life, it minimizes job opportunities and makes this less of an attractive place for people to want to stay, let alone come to. And so moving forward here to 2026 on the Colorado River, there's going to be a series of renegotiations of key agreements and terms, many of which there's going to be an attempt for some large suburban and urban areas across the Colorado River Basin, which covers 7 states in Mexico. And there is a number of urban, suburban agencies that essentially want to take water from rural, agricultural, and tribal communities and from the benefit of the environment as well, and build short-sighted sprawl growth for their benefit, leaving in their wake a number of desiccated and decimated rural communities behind. I think that's wrong. I think that in Imperial Valley, we need to keep our water here, put that water to good use here in Imperial Valley. That's where we create the maximum benefit from that water. And as we're moving forward to these key agreements, we can build coalitions that benefit not only the Imperial Valley, but rural, agricultural, tribal communities as well as benefiting the environment as a whole. And that is what's made me throw my hat in the race. And I'm glad to have the support of the people of Heber, El Centro, and Sealy as we were successful in the March 2020 primary with first place and a double-digit lead over some of the other candidates.
Awesome. Katie?
For me, Imperial's always been kind of like my home where I grew up. I mean, I know I left for college for a few years, but, came right back. It's always been home, and the people who are there are my family. I'm like, most of my family actually lives in Imperial. Doing research, I found out my family came here in the late teens of the 1900s. And then so it's been, our home forever. But also, my late husband and I, when we had our kids, we kind of talked about morals and things that we wanted them to grow up with. what role models, and one of the biggest ones, we wanted them to like have this sense of community and like to give back to the places, that give to you. And so obviously, like, I'm not going to go out and be a firefighter or a police officer, none of that. I'm more of a science nerd. So sitting on city council, just kind of, is my way to give back to the community. And then I'm a business partner in businesses in Imperial. Just you need to have that smart business mind, and you kind of see, the lack of budget for certain things in the city, but then you see certain things where you're just like, why would you do that? It's kind of silly. And but yeah, so remember that, the city is a business as well, and it needs to be ran smartly and sustainably. You see a lot of growth in Imperial, but you really don't see a lot of businesses staying there. So I kind of just have the big question, why? And so I've heard a lot of like excuses for, like the abandoned houses on the Berkshire Road. The same thing with, the ghost hotel. And you hear it come up, and everybody's got the same excuse. And so for me, I'm like, okay, well, let's try something different. And I think I really bring to the table, because Salt and Sea, you kind of, everything, you hear the same excuses, and then you sit back and you go, okay, why? And then, how can I go off this creatively? So I think that's just the biggest reason, and just be a good role model for my kids and give back to the community. I mean, I've fallen on my face so many times just with tragedies in my life, and the community of Imperial is unlike any other. And so, they really are a family, and just even now, like just barely launching my campaign, like the support's so overwhelming. And then, it kind of just goes back to, okay, this is my way of giving back to all those people who've been there for me and my family, throughout, my life.
Cool. Thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thank you for having me again. And with that, if anyone knows me, they know that I am absolutely passionate about education. So
life, man, you're just passionate about life.
I have so much energy, and for a while, I feel like I wasn't pouring that energy or prioritizing that energy within our local community. I do come from the background of a family of educators, as I've previously mentioned, and I teach 4th grade out at McCabe. And I've had the experience to tour across the U.S., to speak at national conferences, and I've gained recognition. And I'm a part of. And at the same time, by the way, can you all hear me okay? It just said that I
paused a little bit.
Okay, perfect. So at the same time, I've been able to tour across the U.S. and really learn what's happening about education, but across the actual, the nation. So not just our county, our local county, right? But learn about the systemic problems that all of our stakeholders are facing, all of our teachers, all of our students, all of our parents, right? And so it got to the point where I told myself, I had like this epiphany, this light bulb moment of, well, you're doing all of this, Andrew, for education nationally, but what are you doing for your home, for El Centro, for the other little Andrew Arevalos that are all across El Centro? What are you doing for them? And if you're not doing something for them, what can you do to do something more? So even saying that, by the way, it gives me like chills. I have chills because I am passionate, right? And so I want to increase, the opportunities that our students have. I want to make sure that they have the same equitable factors across El Centro. We have 12, schools for El Centro Elementary School District. And, I'm very passionate about doing what I can for our stakeholders, and at the same time supporting them through my network, right? So, I do have this following, this recognition, but it wasn't enough for me. It was really and truly trying to connect it back to El Centro. And let me tell you, it is uncomfortable to step into this local political limelight, okay? Foremost,
How you like it?
It is very uncomfortable, and once you do that, you're all the way in, right? So it's not like a teeny tiny step. It's you jump all the way in and you're in. Earlier today, I had a conversation with a gentleman, right? And he was outside watering his grass. And I said, well, let me go introduce myself to this gentleman. And I made the case, I said, hey, my name's Andrew Arevalo. I'm a local elementary teacher. I'm passionate about education. And here are my points. This is what I'm trying to do. And I need support, right? I need as much support as I can get from our community. And he was like, you got my support. And I didn't even know who you were. Mm-hmm. All it took was me stopping by, me feeling a little bit uncomfortable, me feeling awkward as I approached the stranger, right? And so it really does come from a place of my heart, and I'm passionate, like I said, about really trying to improve our opportunities for our students here in El Centro. At the same time, trying to do the same for our teachers. I'm an educator. That's my priority first and foremost. So I have the experience where I can help teachers because I'm going through distance learning. I'm teaching amid a crisis. I'm living in the pandemic with my students. That's something that none of the incumbents that I'm going up against have. And I don't say that in a way, to be any particular way, in terms of attacking them or anything like that. That's not my MO, but that's just the fact, right? Is that many of them, they've never experienced distance learning, none of them. They probably haven't taught during the Common Core, which are our new standards. So these are real issues, and I'm living through this. I'm fluent in them, and I have the confidence to do so, right? Is it uncomfortable? Yeah. I'd say 100%, but is it worth it, right? Is what I'm fighting for, 100% worth the awkwardness, the uncomfortableness, the nerves? Absolutely. So that's a little bit about who I am and why I'm running, right?
Yeah, no, awesome, man. And I was talking to Carlos Hernandez, another, right, first time candidate, young, exciting, and, those perspectives, right, each of us bring, right? But like I said, with teachers, because I can hear in the schoolroom, I've heard about attendance and application logs, but, you guys are on the front line, and that experience, dealing directly with it, is much more impactful than me simply hearing about it from many or even reading about it. So yeah, I completely get that. So for the next question, I'll go to Katie to start off. What immediate impact do you think you will bring to the city council, in your case, to the city of Imperial, when elected? I'm assuming all three of you will get elected and win. I think your message will resonate with the people. So when elected, what immediate impact, Katie, do you think you'll bring to that city council?
I think I'm definitely going to bring in a whole new perspective. I mean, I want to say I'm at least 10 years younger than the youngest council member that sits on that commission. So yeah, I just think a different mindset, a different looking at things. I'm really good at looking at both sides of the situation and kind of try to find like a happy medium. I think that's one of my best qualities, is being able to look at both sides and then make a really logical decision. I don't shoot from the hip, and so I've seen that council make decisions where they shoot from the hip, essentially, which I really don't like to do. I like to be really logical. One of the biggest things I'm passionate about is the parks, and I mean, they're terrible, but we've heard them be a campaign platform over and over and over again. And so you kind of connect that back to Salt and Sea, which is what I've been doing, for at least the last 5 years of my career. So why is this not working? Let's think outside the box. Maybe it won't be this big, pretty green park that we think it is, because it's actually in a retention basin, not, an area, suitable for a park. But, how can we make this different? How can we, can we make it a skate park? Can we make it a, BMX I'm a bike nerd, grew up doing that. So obviously I'm like, can we make a BMX track somewhere? Just different ideas that come to it. Also, I'm, grew up with my parents were a small business owner. My mom was been a produce broker, and my parents actually owned a bike shop in El Centro while I was racing BMX, or at least my brother and I, when we were doing that. So, just that business model mindset has kind of always been something that's just, with me. So you think of everything as what's the best business decision that's coming right now. especially the time where we know that going into next year, our budget's not going to be as big, you know, so where can we make, kind of trim the fat? What are the things we can get away with? What do we need to prioritize, you know, and make priority, like best prioritization made based on what the city actually needs, not necessarily what we want right now, but what do we need? So that's, I think, the biggest that I'll come in with.
Yeah, no, I completely accept, Kay, that whole, you know, sometimes you see on electeds, especially city council, someone who either whole career in business or whole career in public, and you know, you kind of bring that kind of best of both worlds, you know, work in the public sector and private sector, your family with business mindset. And so you have understanding and building those relationships with the private and public sector to benefit your community. So yeah, I, I see that working with you, knowing you. So that's, I think that's really exciting. So Andrew, I'll go with you. What immediate impact do you think you'll bring when elected to the Centro Elementary School District?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, you
Thank
gain
me.
I would say, first and foremost, you gain the perspective of a current practicing educator, right? No one has that right now, and that's what I can bring. Is I know our stakeholders, as I previously mentioned, because I'm living through this distance learning crisis. And by the way, you know, we have COVID-19, that's a crisis. Distance learning is its own crisis, right? I mean, let's just be frank about that. Parents are overwhelmed, they're stressed out, teachers, the students, and then we have legislation that's passed from the state that, at least in my perspective, the people who wrote the legislation weren't very empathetic of the parents. And so I have this perspective where I'm fluent in 21st century education. So what that means, pedagogy, what that means, educational technology, what that means, a network of educators across the United States that I could ask for anything. Hey, for example, Mr. John Caripo, do you have something at your district that we could use? Yeah, okay, let me see it. I have that perspective, not just from the county, that's across the United States, right? And I say that humbly because those are relationships that I've been able to you know, gather and foster through speaking at these conferences. So the perspective is, you know, you get the real world right now type of experience, the leadership that counts, which is right now, not 40, 30, 20 years ago. We need educators, we need board members who understand education today. That's what our students deserve. And at the same time, you know, we tackle a couple of points. By the way, are we getting into the points in this question, or are you gonna ask a follow-up question for the 3 points and some of the points that I wanna talk about?
Go ahead, do you.
Well, perfect. The first thing I want to do is bridge the educational technology gap, right? That's the biggest one. We have essentially 4 generations of teachers teaching across the county, right? And so we have your Andrew Arevalos, then we have my fathers, we have the Greg Arevalos. So how do we bridge that gap so that we support both the Andrew Arevalos and the Greg Arevalos, and we bring it to a place that is perspective to our and relevant to our stakeholders, right? To our kids, to our teachers. At the same time, you know, the same leaders who tout their leadership as having this you know, there's a sense of ageism that gets thrown at us, right? Often because of our age, but at the same time, you know, it's not hard to look at the facts. The fact is, for El Centro Elementary students in particular, 80% of El Centro Elementary students are failing in terms of their science comprehension, right? So 80% aren't meeting the standard. 67% aren't meeting the standard in math. I have never had scores like that in my own classroom. If I did, that would be a failure for me as a teacher, as an educator. I would go and I would reflect and I would try to figure out, where did I mess up? And I would go through the iterative process to try to improve, right? So if you look at the 4-year history of these scores, they've remained relatively stagnant. So the same people who are saying they have experience, they have leadership. Yeah, you know what else we also have is we have years of kids failing, right? That's just the pattern. And it's a cycle that continues to repeat and repeat and repeat. At the same time, the next thing I really want to focus on is financial curriculum, financial literacy, developing this. So I'm an educator, right? I come from that perspective and that background. But what a lot of people don't know is I'm also an entrepreneur, right? I bought my first set of apartments at the age of 25. I rode the Imperial Valley Transit for 5 years, and I was a regular, right? And I knew everyone on the transit. We all kind of hung out, and my fiance drove our Centro, our one vehicle, and she would pick me up at all the different spots. And through having that sound discipline of, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to get to this point, we're able to acquire our apartments. So I am passionate about instilling that type of education in our local students so that when they enter our local community and the workforce, they're not plagued by debt, right? By consumer debt, that they know how to manage their money, that they're not living paycheck to paycheck. But the reality is the most we ever get is essentially one semester of economics in high school. That's about as much as I got. And then I'm thrown into the real world and I get my first check and I'm like, oh, what do I do with this? I want shoes. I want whatever I want. So we have to instill a foundation in financial literacy, and we have to build that. And when we do that, we're going to see more, businesses pop up because we're going to have students who actually know what a credit score is. They're gonna know, well, what is good? What is a good credit score, right? And so that's what I want for our stakeholders. I want that for the people on the east side, the north side, the west side, the south side, because all that means is our community gets better. We have more businesses. We have more people who have literacy and in their financial decisions. So, sorry, I'm passionate. I have to stop myself.
It's all good. I know, man. We were all like, you got us all good, man. We were all listening, man. So thank you. No, yeah. Follow that up, JB.
Wow. I get to talk about the dry subject of power rates and water. Anyway. Yeah, well, I think that a bit of the difference about what your question is the difference being made immediately on the board. And as Andrew said, there is a bit of an age difference that automatically comes there. But I think as part of that, there is a long-term view as well. I think something that we've reflected on over time is that young people, especially who are interested in improving the Imperial Valley, have a unique perspective on things. While it may seem natural that a younger person may kick things off or not be as passionate, the irony is that myself and others, I know that's certainly the case with you, Gil, we have a sense of urgency because we know the decisions that are made today are going to affect us for the next 50, 60, 70 years that we're alive and everybody that follows after that. So I believe that there's that sense of urgency, but also for my personal example, there's a sense of history in reflecting both, not just as merely what's happened in the past, but how it applies to our future in Imperial Valley. We have a long and storied history in terms of how Imperial came to be from being this empty, barren stretch of desert into the vibrant, productive place that it is today. And while it's beset with its challenges now, I don't believe it's something, or these are things we cannot overcome. We just look back at having this desolate, one of the hottest, most desolate places in the continent of North America, and we managed to turn this into 500,000 acres of productive farmland and a community of 180,000 people in a place that feeds the world and powers with our energy, renewable energy, many places outside of here. And it all is a result of the far-sighted efforts of those who came and settled the Imperial Valley, turned it into what it was, and people like Phil Swing, who saw the Imperial Valley, came here, and was the general counsel for IID. I think he was the Brawley City attorney at the age of 24 years old or so, and ultimately worked his way up and became our congressman, representing an enormous area of this state that covered San Diego, Imperial, San Bernardino, Riverside, all the way up nearly to Lake Tahoe. And so when he was in Congress, the signature achievement of what Phil Swing, who was from right here in Imperial Valley, we haven't had a congressman for a while, but he was our first one that was from here. he was responsible for the passage of the Boulder Canyon Project Act that built both the Hoover Dam and also the All-American Canal. The Hoover Dam to protect Imperial Valley from floods that once inundated the Imperial Valley for millennia, and especially from 1905 to '07, that formed the Salton Sea as it is today. And secondly, the All-American Canal, the engineering marvel that it is, that takes direct water directly from the Colorado River for use here in Imperial Valley. And it is the farsightedness of those who built the IID, the wonderful publicly owned, community-owned thing that it is, to serve the lowest cost and most affordable and most reliable, except for today, of course, on the power side, but water and power in California. And even then, we still have the most reliable power with rolling blackouts throughout the rest of CalISO's service territory. But the point being is that history is important, because as we move forward, especially to 2026, one of the things that Phil Swing and others at IID were responsible in the 20s and 30s is they worked and teams across the larger Colorado River Basin and built coalitions to ultimately make this crowning achievement of the modern era possible, like the Hoover Dam. And that was all built because of the Imperial Valley's efforts, and the rest of the Southwest was settled and the desert was made to bloom because of the early efforts of Imperial Valley. In a similar way, as we're moving forward to these critical negotiations on the Colorado River, I believe it's vital that Imperial Valley form partnerships and coalitions with other rural communities, agricultural communities, and tribes, as well as those who are interested in preserving the environment. And that Imperial Valley can once again have that leadership position across the entire Colorado River Basin, those 7 states in Mexico, that we set the terms and not have the terms set for us by others. Because what we've experienced over the past while, and especially with what will be my predecessor on the IID board, is the squandering of what other generations have built up for us, and we need to not give it away. We need to keep it here and build onto it.
Cool. Yeah. A couple of things I want to talk on. Andrew, you shared about, relationships, right, with others and bringing ideas back, right? Sometimes people want to reinvent the wheel, where inspiration can become anywhere, and right, how do you tailor it? I mean, Katie's a great example. She works in the local air district in less than 2 years, has done projects like McCabe, a parking lot, projects all across the valley, building relationships locally, right? Not just with other public county departments or ID, but with schools, right? Building that relationship. Talk to anyone from the state or on Salton Sea, federal officials, they'll know Katie, right? Building these relationships, the same way you built them, the same way you built them, JB. And also, I think, talk about ageism, right? People might see us as kids, but we're young adults, right? Katie and I have families, right? We have children, right? So our stake, Andrew, you work directly with children, so you see day in, day out. And JB is the most mature young man I've ever met.
Division 2 director doesn't feel so.
Right, so I think people might see us, right, as kids. Like, don't get us wrong, we do have a sense of urgency, somewhat idealistic, but we're also grounded, right, in the process and the realities, but also pushing the things, right, and understanding how and working from within. I think that's what I think excites me about you three, is that it's this whole breadth of knowledge, right? Even though our experience might be years, could not compare with others, but we've crammed so much work into that, right? I know the work each of you guys do, and it's condensed. You guys have this body of work that might not span decades yet, but so much condensed and so little that it's exciting to see, when you guys get elected, to take off from there. So, last question tonight, Andrew kind of touched on it, was, people running for the first time, right? You hear, what about the experience? And so I don't know if you want to add anything on to what you had said previously about those who might call out experience as some sort of determining factor to why someone should be elected.
Absolutely. And I think the point is that if we rely on the narrative experience, we miss on the opportunity of having experience that is relevant, right? You can have experience. No one's knocking your experience. Like I said, my father, he just completed 43 years of experience, 42 years, sorry. He's on his 43rd year. And I'm not knocking anyone's experience, but what I'm saying is my experience, respectfully, is more relevant right now, today, because I'm in the classroom, right? I have an urgency to want to do more because I understand the problems better than any of the people I'm running up against. That is the reality. And the reason I understand them and that I'm so fluent in them is because I'm living them. You can't walk in my shoes, if you continue to tout the narrative of experience over everything, right? It's not experience over everything. It is experience that is relevant today to our Centro, to our students, to our parents, to our families. And so all I ask, is that, come November 3rd, we look at experience that is relevant right now, that is relevant today. We have the opportunity to select someone who's literally been across the nation, spoken at the biggest educational conferences. I'm keynoting the National Q Conference for educators, right, in educational technology next month, which, by the way, I better work on my slides for that. and the reason I haven't even focused on that or prioritized that is because this means more, right? I don't care if I'm a day late in submitting those slides. I mean, granted, I will try my best to not be a day late, but going and putting up the sign, going and talking to the stranger down the street, my neighbor down the street, that is more important than speaking at any conference. And the reason it's so important is because when you talk to these stakeholders, you understand what they're going through, right? And the dad told me earlier, said, I have 2 kids. I know exactly what you're talking about. I connected with him because we had the empathy for one another because we're walking in the same shoes, essentially. The only difference is that he's the parent and I'm the teacher, but we're living through it together. So, like I said, how much do we want to continue with the narrative of my experience over Andrew's experience when I have the more relevant experience?
Boom. No, yeah, man, I agree, right? That's, man, on point, especially now distance learning, man. It's so important. And that's what Carlos, I was talking to Carlos earlier. I was like, yeah, dude, you get it, man. It was so awesome, enlightening to hear. So totally agree. So JB, turns to you. You've been
Yeah.
It's been quite right. Yeah, I mean, you got the young face as well. I think that's what adds on to maybe some of the comments.
Yes.
Benjamin Button.
Put your old person filter on for this.
Yeah, he's up there. I need to pull him down from the wall. But yeah, the experience has been something that has been a big focus of our campaign, or dings against us by various folks who are not as enthusiastic as the majority of voters about having me as the Division II IID director. But like Andrew mentioned, there's a difference between experience and relevant experience. And as we argue, or I argue, there is a difference between good experience and there's such a thing as bad experience too. So yeah, they're right. I don't have experience. I don't have experience selling water to San Diego. I don't have experience raising people's power bills. I don't have any experience for keeping the Salton Sea in its condition the same as it has been for the past 17 years, only allowing it to worsen. I don't have any experience in denying the reality that the Salton Sea is an environmental threat to Imperial Valley. That is experience that other folks have had. I don't think it's been to the benefit of the Imperial Valley. I think that there is a lot that is lost when we talk merely about experience. We don't talk about merit, and we don't talk about preparation, when we don't talk about relevant knowledge or skills that are going to serve the public good in Imperial Valley. Simply having years of experience on a city council or a special district or a school board and simply counting the years rather than counting achievements, or having the relevant experience like Andrew mentioned to actually handle the issues at hand and do them successfully that are going to benefit this community in the long term. I think that those are discounted when there's this generalized statement of experience, which doesn't actually mean a whole lot other than, and I think it does have, as Andrew's mentioned before, some sort of ageist connotations, because it's not about what people are able to do or how they're able to serve the community, it's a pretty arbitrary thing about how long somebody's been alive rather than what they've done in the time they've been alive.
Yeah, no, Jay, I know people that, well, he's young. And I go, well, he's 54. And they go, really? No, I go talk to
Good
him.
skin cream.
I go talk to him about water. Ask him. And I had people say, I talked to him, man, whoa, like been blown away with your knowledge of and the history of water issues across the Colorado River Basin. And so, right, it goes back to experiential knowledge, right? And you're like a book when it comes to water. I can put you on this mic and say, hey, no script, nothing. You can rattle off so much information about water and issues that pertain to IID and the Imperial Valley. So, whenever someone's asked me, brought up your age or how young you look, I was just talk to the young man. Just talk to him, and you'll see for yourself. And people have, and they've come away so amazed, impressed, and supporters. So, thank you for that. So, Katie, that comes to you. People, what would you say people saying, talking about experience?
So experience, back to the ageism too, but I mean, I'm also a woman. So I'm a young white woman running, for a position of leadership. But I think for me, it's actually something I've been dealing with kind of my whole life. I grew up racing BMX, which that was 100% a boys sport, I mean, yeah. And so, I started that when I was 6 and then quit when I was about 17. And I was actually, turned pro and, raced all over the country and, had a lot of success with that. But no, I remember my dad always telling me, Kate, I'll give you the best equipment that, everybody else has. I'll give you the same opportunity everybody else has, but you got to put in the work, and so I wanted to win. I was super competitive and I wanted to win, and I just had that drive. And I think that set me apart from a lot of other people that I was racing against or racing, with. But so it's kind of something that I've always just been instilled in. It was an individual sport. So I knew if I wanted to win, which I did, I had to work hard. I was, obsessed with it. I did the uncomfortable work. I was the one outside training on my bike when it was 115 outside. And it's definitely not something I wanted to do, but you have to do the uncomfortable work, as Andrew mentioned earlier. So, I had sponsors. So I essentially, had these bosses that told me, okay, this is what you got to wear. And, when you're racing, this is a bike you're going to ride because it's, they're who they pushed for. And so it kind of like turned into a little bit of a job, but it was always still really fun for me. So it didn't matter. Like, I'd come home and I'd have, like I remember coming home I was in junior high and I had like 2 brand new bikes and like a bunch of gear. And it was like Christmas, in January, because I just got picked up by one of these really big teams that was the number 3 team in the country. And so, then essentially like these people are investing into you to do well. So it kind of became a job where they relied on me to work hard for it. And I think that's the same thing with getting elected for council, right? So, I was doing that when I was like 11, 12, 13, so this is not something new that I've had to work hard. Then I was actually like super shy as a kid. So doing the uncomfortable work, like coming out of that shyness is something that like BMX brought. And then when I went to college, I was like, hey, I'm going to join a sorority. Little did I know that sorority was going to put me in every single uncomfortable situation. Like during rush, like I swear I had every cheerleader who just loved to go shopping come through, which I had nothing in common with. But, it made me, right? Like, what do you talk to them about? Oh, yeah, we didn't even have a mall where I lived until I was a junior in high school, like much less my place to hang out, But, it made you learn how to talk to everybody, right? And so then I had my daughter Parker right after I graduated college. And so then going into work in the private industry at a geothermal plant, much less, walking around where it's hot and humid and loud. But I mean, that was the first really good job offer, and it always out there, again, one of the few women, definitely the youngest person out there. Like I always got, oh kid, I've been working out here longer than you've been alive, which was actually the truth for a lot of them, especially when you're the 22-year-old kid walking around the plant. But I was the 22-year-old kid that went out there and was like, I'm going to learn anything and everything that I can, because I knew what I was doing, there was growth from it, and so I asked them a lot of questions and, would question them on how the process worked. And, I worked in the lab and moved my way to the environmental department, and then so starting to work on the Salton Sea, which I didn't really realize how political that was going to be. And so, and how much red tape it was going to be. And you kind of have to learn, like, okay, hey, let's open the door, you know, and this is the way you get stuff done. Well, you know, you learn like, okay, well, you know, there's a guard at the front door. So, you know, let's try the back door. Here, let's build a window. Here, let's, you know, build a tunnel. Let's go around. And you got to look at all these options, you know, for me, because when I have goals, like giving up's really not an option. And so, you know, same thing. I've had some battles in my personal life where you got to talk about the uncomfortable things. You got to ask the hard questions, and you got to do your own research, you know, even though, you know, a public agency and, you know, you can do these public records requests and all of that. You think everything's available to you, but you don't always get everything that's available, you know, so you kind of got to network and pull in all your information, you know, to get the real, kind of like a real story or real, gather all your facts. That's the biggest thing, because you can't, unfortunately, you can trust people, but you have to verify what you find out. And so for me, I've had to deal with all these different issues and just, you know, work really hard. And, you know, you see like the biggest thing on Salton Sea is people get worn out. They give up because
PowerPoint present and what PowerPoint promises.
Right, exactly. PowerPoint promises, you know, and so I'm like, all right, I'm going to take your PowerPoint promises and I'm going to put them in a stipulated order for abatement where you have to meet them, you know, because now I'm going to hold you accountable. And you find the lack of accountability in the public, or the public sector, more than you do in the private sector, because in the private sector, right, if you don't perform, you're gone. They don't care. They can replace you in a second. In the public sector, you know, it's really hard, you know, essentially to get yourself fired or stuff like that, you know. So you see like kind of like the slack of it, and even, you know, it's, but yeah, so my experience, I mean, goes from, it's all over the place, you know. So I guarantee you, like, even, yeah, these people are older than me, but experience working hard and following through and setting goals, you know, and achieving them, you know. Like after my husband passed away, I literally every day made a goal, you know, and just because everything was hard, right? So, you know, my goal for the day would literally be like, okay, Katie, today you're going to get up and you're going to not wear workout clothes, you know. Today you're going to get up and you're going to take a shower and you're going to put some makeup on and you're going to go to Starbucks and get the heck out of the house. You know what I mean? And so all these little goals, you know, and then everything became easier, right? So even now when you set little goals and you achieve them, you just keep moving forward, you know. And so you always remember, like, kind of be humbled remember where you started, you know. And so for me, like, my roots are in Imperial, and that's where I started. And like, I have found this cool letter, like, from the police chief. It was from 1999, and I had just won, I don't remember, I just won some race, but the police chief had wrote me, like, sent me an article, I was in the newspaper for it, and like hand wrote me a letter with it. And then she had like printed it on, like, you know how when they transfer it onto metal, like the newspaper article, like, how many public officials do that anymore for these kids, you know? So that's kind of like the small things that I want to see given back in our community. That's what I mean by, you know, let's keep growing, but let's keep our small town roots where everybody is invested in all of, you know, the community.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And, you know, I know I've interviewed Andrew one-on-one, and I plan on doing one with you, Katie, and JB. But like Katie said, you know, from BMX to geothermal to science, right? These fields that majority men, and as a woman, you've entered them, right? And made your mark and accomplished things. I've seen it at the Air District from day one, the body of work you so no, thank you guys. I thought this was a really great conversation, need to be had. JB, you want to, and Katie, then Andrew, any final thoughts before we sign off?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's so important to vote this November 3rd. The irony of these things is so much of our news feeds or our news reading is dominated by these national or often state issues. But the irony is really that 95% of the issues that really affect you most are within a 50-mile radius of your house. And I think that's true nowhere more so than especially schools and the IID. The decisions that get made at the schools, and in Andrew's case, last for generations. But at IID specifically, the decisions that get made, many of them, the most important ones, are permanent. And it's so important that we have proper leadership in place that recognizes the value of Imperial Valley's water, that we work to keep it here, that we do not raise people's power rates, especially in this difficult time of coronavirus where many people can't even afford to pay their rent or collect rent. And that we stand up for the Salton Sea, including doing the difficult things of even potentially declaring a breach of the QSA water transfers if necessary, because that's how important the Salton Sea is to the continued health of the Imperial Valley, keeping our water here and ensuring its use here for everyone's benefit, as well as protecting public health and the environment of the birds that enjoy the Salton Sea also. So, and not to mention the New River as well. And that's another thing about experience is for 80 years, we've experienced the same thing at the New River, at least, which is the dirtiest river in North America. Yet 80 years, we've experienced the same thing. And that's something I'm very passionate about over the next few years here as we're leading up to these Colorado River renegotiations, that the New River is included to be solved in its finality as a part of that agreement. And so those are the issues that I'm passionate about, ensuring that we have plentiful water in Imperial Valley, ensuring that we have clean air, and that we have a healthy environment for us all to live in, and a place in Imperial Valley where people come back to, not flee from, and where we can attract people to here to have a wealthier and healthier place that is more educated and is more prosperous. I believe that that is within reach, but it's important that everybody registers their desire for a different and new experience, and they can do that by voting.
Awesome. Thank you. Katie, any final thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank you for having us today. I feel like it's kind of a prep for like the debates that we'll be going through.
It's true.
Right? Like I'm so novice at those, you know, like I went and talked and answered like forum questions about things were, you know, that are fact-based and that I know, but this on like my beliefs and like, you know, putting myself out there in my views and doing the uncomfortable work, that's kind of different. So I appreciate the prep work, but no, just like JB said, you know, back on voting, look who, you know, if you ask people, okay, who's your president, who's the governor, they always know. But then you ask them, who's your city councilman? Who'd you vote for? Why did you vote for that person? What do they believe in? You know, what do they, you know, what have they accomplished since they've done it? You know, what PowerPoint promises have they given to get elected, and what have they done? You know, so, you know, it's time to start doing the uncomfortable work, asking the uncomfortable questions, and, you know, moving forward. So I think I bring that in, you know, and bring in a different perspective because I'm younger and I've grown up here. And so Imperial really is my home. And yeah, I mean, obviously I convinced my Hopeville husband, or late husband, who is family bled green and yellow for the Vikings, and moved him to Imperial where he even liked it. So, but yeah, so, because it is so great and it is a family, you know, you can actually go outside and your neighbors actually talk to you, and they're super nice and stuff. So I just want that to continue staying here and, you know, get some businesses here, get us, you know, I'm so tired of my tax money just going to El Centro Brawley because that's where they have the big box stores, you know. Let's get businesses in Imperial and get them to stay here.
Awesome. And Andrew, first and foremost, you better thank me. You better thank me.
Well, yeah, of course. You know, no, thank you to all of you. I mean, there's a perspective that at least I'm sure all of us have gone through, which is essentially coming to the realization that we are what our community needs, and buying into the belief that we can do it and that we have the confidence to do it, right? It's something that I kind of have struggled with, but, you know, at the same time, it comes from a place of my heart where I'm stepping up regardless of the obstacles that I'm facing, regardless of the people who are going to yank down my banners on my personal property, regardless of the uncomfortableness that comes with all of this. I'm doing it because I love El Centro. I'm doing this because I'm passionate about our students. I'm doing this because I'm fluent in education, in 21st century education. I'm doing this because I'm the biggest kid in my classroom, right? And I want what's best for our kids. And the reality is I'm the only person running right now for El Centro Elementary School District that is a current educator. I'm the only one that has experience with Common Core. I'm the only one that has experience with distance learning. So I'm excited. I'm really, really excited because I'm stepping up, and I know that I can create the type of change that we need here in El Centro, particular for our parents, supporting them, particular for our teachers, so supporting them as well so that they're not overwhelmed or stressed out, and making sure that our kids have access to the same types of opportunities that are outside of the Imperial Valley, right? So that our neighbors in San Diego get jealous of what's happening here in El Centro instead of vice versa, right? And going through that actually for the whole county. So with that, I'm also the only probably person running that can actually get someone signed up in a Zoom session by sharing my screen, right? I did that with someone the other day. Oh, what does that mean, right? I did that, and I can do that for anyone. My number, 760-960-1304. I will get you signed up to vote. It's an easy process, and I'll do it through Zoom, assuming my internet connection is working, right? Because that's another problem that all of us are facing here in the Imperial Valley. It's horrible internet. But with that, thank you for the support, and come November 3rd, vote Arevalo for ECSC.
Thank you, man. Like you said, man, we're all stepping up, right? All stepping up. I'm assuming you're all going to win, not because I think you're the best. Each of you are best suited candidates in your races, because I know you guys are going to work hard. I've seen firsthand each of you, putting out signs, working hard to get grants passed, working hard to advocate, traveling across a river and across the state. I mean, so, when I express this confidence that I think each of you has as well, it's because it's a compilation of everything, of what makes each of you. And so I'm really excited, not for just the immediate future with this election in November, but for the next few decades. I think we can all, four of us, and the networks we will build moving forward, really just set the course for the Imperial Valley, for our families, down the line. I think it's exciting seeing some things. So thank you guys. You guys have a great week. I'm gonna stop recording, but thank you guys, and hopefully everyone listened, learned a lot about you guys. Thank
Throw
you.
a pen at the tree.